오늘은 사랑 어떤 신을 섬길 것이냐의 문제, Love Redefined, Choosing Whom You Will Serve라는 제목으로 말씀 나누도록 하겠습니다. Last week, we looked at the story of Israel's conquest and settlement in the Promised Land. Joshua was the one who led Israel. Now, after completing all his mission, the time has come for Joshua to leave this world and return to the Lord. Before he dies, he gathers the people of Israel and renews the covenant between Israel and God. The covenant renewal is recorded in the final chapter of the book of Joshua, which is chapter 24. Joshua reminds the people of one important thing. The only reason they made it this far was God's grace. God's grace meaning the love of God. It was the loving God who rescued them from Egypt. It was the loving God who fed them in the wilderness. When Sihon, the king of Amorites, and Og, the king of Bashan, attacked Israel, who had no real military strength back then, it was God who gave them the victory. After they entered the promised land, they marched around the first city, which is Jericho, 13 times, and the walls collapsed, simply collapsed. It was also God who enabled them to defeat all 31 kings of Canaan. Just before the verse we read in Joshua 24:13, in verse 12, God says this, "And I sent the hornet before you, which drove them out before you." The hornet here means that God put fear into the hearts of the enemies. The hornet, it doesn't mean actual hornet attacking them. God filled the enemies with such terror, like being attacked by hornet, that they couldn't even fight. If Israel thought, in the end of verse 12 says, "It was not by your sword or by your bow." If Israel thought they won the war by their sword and by their bow, they were completely mistaken. Sometimes at the end of the day, I think about how God protected me all throughout the day. And as I do that, I begin to understand that God protected me from dangers I didn't even know about. I begin to understand that He touched the heart of the people I met. And because of that, my day turns out to be meaningful and worthwhile. Maybe the doors in my life don't open simply because I knocked on them hard. Maybe they open because God moves the heart of the doorkeepers, whoever they are. Maybe I do not get good results simply because I work and study hard. Maybe whenever I work or study, the Lord gives me wisdom and strength so that I could do what I do and I could understand what I study, and my efforts could bear fruit. It is not because of my sword and my bow. It is because the Lord goes before me and fights for me. That's why in verse 13 says that as a result, they were profiting on a land they didn't labor. They were living in cities they didn't build. And they are eating from vineyard they didn't plant. My prayer is that God would open your eyes to see that He has been working in your lives all along as well. That you could realize that what He has given you is far greater than what He has not given you. May your eyes be open to see and realize that what He has given you is far greater than what He has not given you. And then, only then, we can say this. Joshua says, therefore, fear the Lord and serve Him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Fearing the Lord and worshiping the Lord is only possible then, when we recognize that He has given us more than enough. Then we can, as Joshua tells them, we can fear the Lord. First, fear the Lord. What do you mean by fearing the Lord? Not all fear is bad, right? Not all fear is bad. Someone with no fear will drive recklessly, right? And someone with no fear will ignore their own health. When you operate heavy machinery in a factory, a certain level of fear is necessary and even mandatory. In the same way, fearing the Lord is essential to our lives. A simple definition of fearing the Lord is this: always thinking about and remembering God. Always thinking about and remembering God. That's the definition of fearing the Lord. It is to remember the Creator, to remember the loving God who fights before you, to remember the loving God who feeds you, protects you, and opens the way before you. And Joshua also says to serve Him, not only fear Him, but to serve Him sincerely and faithfully, not with divided heart. I often say this: human beings are by nature worshiping creatures. Human beings are by nature worshiping creatures. Worship comes from combination of two words: worth plus ship. Ship meaning the act of doing something. So it means worship is worthship. It's giving value or worth to something. When we decide something is important and we invest our lives in it, it is practically a worship. That's why people worship money, because money matters to them. They invest their lives in earning it. That's a form of worship. People worship popularity. They invest their time and energy creating content to gain followers on social media. That is also a form of worship. Worship happens to everyone, everywhere. God's people may also earn money and create content, but they worship God. What does it mean? What does it mean? What does worshiping God mean in practical terms? It means the final goal of our lives doesn't end with us. It ends with God. That's the definition of simple worship. Simple definition of worship. Joshua continues, "But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord," in verse 15 of Joshua 24. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Simply put, serving the Lord means this: the ultimate purpose of everything I possess and everything I enjoy in the promised land will not end with me, but with God. If I have money, I won't live just for myself with that money. Instead, I will use it for God's kingdom and for sharing God's love with others. The 24 hours given to me every day, each day, won't be spent only on myself, but will be used for the Lord and others. All of my talent, wisdom, and even my popularity will not be used just for me, but for God and others also. This is a life of worshiping God, serving the Lord. So, dear church, today I ask you, I urge you to choose also. Today you also must choose. First, whom will you fear? Whom will you fear as you live your life? Whom will you fear? Meaning, will you live thinking only about yourself, or will you live thinking about God, remembering what God has done for you, remembering what God has given to you? Second, whom will you serve or worship? In the end, will everything stop with you? Or will it go beyond you and end with God? The book of Judges revealed the foolishness and double-mindedness of Israel. With their word, with their lips, they say they'll fear and serve the Lord. But in their actual lives, they do not live that way. My prayer is that you and I would not be like that. Let's pray.